Hello! We're excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on a big secret, how the most successful people in the world actually speak. I'm Anna.
And I'm Abel. Many people think they need a massive vocabulary to be in the top 1%, but today we will show you why being simple is the real superpower.
That is exactly right, Abel. And before we begin, I want to say something important to everyone listening. If you are learning English, if you sometimes feel nervous when you speak, if you worry about your grammar or your accent, today's episode is going to change the way you think about communication forever.
I love that, Anna, and I want to be honest with all of you. I used to think that to sound smart, I needed to use long, complicated words. I thought successful people spoke with these enormous, difficult sentences, but I was completely wrong.
You were not alone, Abel. This is one of the biggest myths about communication. A myth is a belief that many people have, but it is not true. The myth is this: the top 1% of speakers, the CEOs, the world leaders, the best public speakers, they all use big, academic, complicated language. But the truth is actually the opposite.
The opposite? That is so interesting. So what do they actually do?
They use simple words. They use short sentences. They speak clearly. They speak slowly. And most importantly, they make sure that every single person in the room understands them. That is the real skill. That is what separates a good communicator from a great one.
So let me make sure I understand this correctly. The goal is not to impress people with big words. The goal is to connect with people using clear words.
Exactly. And there is a beautiful word for this. The word is concise. Concise means you say what you need to say, but you use as few words as possible. You do not add extra unnecessary information. You get to the point. For example, instead of saying, "I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for your assistance in this matter," you simply say, "Thank you for your help." Both sentences mean the same thing, but which one is easier to understand?
The second one, thank you for your help. It is clear, it is direct, and honestly, it feels more real. It feels more honest.
And that's the key. When you are concise, people trust you more. They feel that you are being genuine. You are not hiding behind big words. You are not trying to sound important. You are just being clear. And the most powerful leaders in the world know this secret.
Can you give us another example, Anna? I think examples really help our listeners.
Of course. Imagine you are in a business meeting. Someone asks you, "What is the problem?" A complicated answer might be, "Well, we are currently experiencing a multifaceted challenge that involves several interconnected variables, and the resolution will require a comprehensive analysis of the underlying factors." Now, that sentence is very long. It's full of difficult words, and honestly, after hearing it, most people still do not know what the problem is.
That is so true. I've heard people speak like that, and I always thought they were very intelligent, but now I realize I didn't actually understand what they were saying.
Exactly. Now, a top 1% communicator would answer the same question like this: the problem is simple. We are spending too much money and we are not making enough sales. We need to fix both. That answer is short, it's clear. Everyone in the room understands it, and now everyone can start working on a solution.
That is so powerful. So the first lesson is, keep it simple, be concise, use clear, direct language.
Yes, and this is wonderful news for English learners. You do not need to learn thousands of advanced vocabulary words to communicate like the top 1%. You need to learn how to use simple words well. That is the secret of simplicity.
I really like that. The secret of simplicity. Now, Anna, I know there's another technique that top speakers use, and I find it fascinating. Can we talk about the power of the pause?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics. Let me ask you something, Abel. When you are speaking and you need a moment to think, what do you usually do?
Honestly, I get nervous. I feel like the silence is uncomfortable, so I start talking faster, or I fill the space with sounds like or. I think many of our listeners do the same thing.
And that's completely natural. Most people are afraid of silence. They think that if they stop speaking, even for 2 or 3 seconds, people will think they are confused or unprepared or not intelligent. But the top 1% of speakers do something very different. They use silence on purpose. They pause intentionally.
On purpose, they choose to be silent?
Yes, and it's incredibly powerful. When you pause before an important point, you create anticipation. People lean in, they pay more attention, they think something important is coming. And when you pause after an important point, you give your audience time to absorb your words. You let your message land, you let it sink in.
So the pause is not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of confidence.
That is a perfect way to say it. When you pause, you show the audience that you are in control. You are not rushing, you are not nervous, you are comfortable with silence. And that comfort makes everyone else feel calm too. Think about the greatest speeches in history. Think about leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela. They did not rush through their words. They spoke slowly, they paused often, and those pauses made their words unforgettable.
I never thought about it that way. So how can our listeners practice this? How can they start using pauses in their everyday English?
It's simpler than you think. The next time you are speaking, whether it's in a conversation, a presentation, or even just practicing alone, try this. Before you say your main idea, take a breath, count to 2 in your head, then say your idea slowly and clearly. After you finish, pause again for 1 or 2 seconds before you continue. At first, it will feel strange, it will feel uncomfortable, but with practice, it will become natural, and people will start to notice. They will say, there is something different about the way you speak. You sound more confident. You sound more in control.
I'm definitely going to practice that. And speaking of how we sound, I think this is a perfect time to talk about tone and intonation, because I've heard many times that how you say something is more important than what you say. Is that really true, Anna?
It is absolutely true, and this is one of the most important lessons in communication. Let me explain what intonation means first. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice when you speak. It's the melody of your speech. It's the music behind your words. Every language has its own intonation patterns, and English is no different.
So it's like the music of speaking.
Exactly, and this music carries meaning. Let me give you an example. I'm going to say the same sentence 2 different ways. Listen carefully. First, that's a really great idea. Did you hear that? My voice went up on the word great. It sounded enthusiastic. It sounded genuine. Now listen to the same words again, but with flat intonation. That's a really great idea. Same words, but the second time it sounded sarcastic, didn't it? It sounded like I didn't actually think it was a great idea at all.
That is amazing. The words were exactly the same, but the meaning changed completely because of the way you said them.
And this is why intonation is so critical. The top 1% of communicators pay close attention to their tone. They know that their voice carries emotion. When they want to show excitement, their voice rises. When they want to show seriousness, their voice becomes lower and steadier. When they want to show empathy, which means understanding how another person feels, their voice becomes soft and warm.
Empathy. I like that word. So empathy is when you understand someone else's feelings.
Yes, empathy is the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes, to feel what they feel. And when you communicate with empathy, people feel heard, they feel understood, they feel valued. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do as a communicator. It's not just about what comes out of your mouth, it's about how your voice makes the other person feel.
That connects to another point I want to discuss. Active listening, because I've read that the best communicators actually spend more time listening than speaking. Is that true, Anna?
It is not just true, it is essential. There is a principle that many communication experts talk about. It is called the 80-20 rule of communication. The idea is simple. The best communicators spend about 80% of their time listening and only 20% of their time speaking.
80% listening? That seems like a lot.
It does seem like a lot, but think about it this way. When you listen carefully to someone, You learn what they need. You learn what they care about. You learn what worries them. And then, when you finally speak, your words are more relevant. Your words are more helpful. Your words are more powerful. Because you are not just talking to fill the silence, you are responding to what the other person actually said.
So it is like collecting information first and then using that information to give a better response.
That is a wonderful way to describe it. And active listening is more than just staying quiet while the other person talks. Active listening means you are fully focused on the speaker. You are not thinking about what you are going to say next. You are not checking your phone. You are not looking around the room. You are giving the speaker your complete attention. And you show this through small signals. You nod your head. You make eye contact. You say small things like, I see, or that makes sense, or tell me more. These small signals tell the speaker, I am here. I am listening. What you're saying matters to me.
I have to admit, I'm not always the best at this. Sometimes when someone is talking, I'm already thinking about my reply. I'm planning what I'm going to say next instead of really hearing what they're saying.
And that's incredibly common. But here's the thing. When people feel that you are truly listening to them, something magical happens. They trust you more. They open up more. They share more. And the connection between you becomes deeper and more meaningful. This is true in business. This is true in friendships. This is true in every area of life. Listening is a superpower.
A superpower. I love that. Okay, Anna, let's talk about something that I personally struggle with. Filler words. You know, those little sounds and words that we use when we are thinking or when we are nervous. Words like, basically. How do we stop using them?
This is such a great question, and it's something that almost everyone deals with, even native English speakers. Filler words are those small, meaningless sounds or words that we insert into our speech when we are searching for the next thing to say. And a few of them here and there are completely normal. But when we use them too often, they can make us sound uncertain, they can make us sound unprepared, and they can distract the listener from our actual message.
So how do the top 1% avoid using filler words?
They replace filler words with silence. Remember what we talked about earlier, the power of the pause? This is where it connects. Instead of saying while you think, you simply pause. You close your mouth, you take a breath, and then you continue. It sounds so simple, but it is transformative. The word transformative means it completely changes something for the better.
So instead of I just stop talking for a moment.
Exactly. And here's a practical exercise for our listeners. Record yourself speaking for 1 minute about any topic. It could be about your day, your hobby, anything. Then listen to the recording. Count how many times you say like, or any other filler word. Most people are shocked when they hear how many filler words they use. Then try again. Record yourself speaking about the same topic, but this time, every time you feel the urge to say pause instead. Just stop, be silent for a second, and then continue. Do this every day for 1 week, and you will see a dramatic improvement.
That is a fantastic exercise. I'm going to try it tonight. Okay, Anna, now I want to talk about something that I think is really special, the storytelling method. I've noticed that great speakers often tell stories instead of just giving information. Why is that?
Because our brains are wired for stories. Since the beginning of human history, we have communicated through stories. We told stories around campfires. We painted stories on cave walls. Stories are how we make sense of the world, and the top 1% of communicators understand this deeply. When you tell someone a fact, they might remember it for a few minutes, but when you wrap that fact inside a story, they will remember it for years. Can you explain what you mean with an example?
Of course. Let me give you 2 versions of the same message. Version 1, just the fact. Preparation is important for success. That's true, it's a good piece of advice, but it's forgettable. Now version 2, the story. I once knew a young man who had a very important job interview. He was nervous, so the night before, he practiced answering questions for 3 hours. He stood in front of his mirror and spoke out loud. He recorded himself and listened back. The next day, he walked into that interview and something amazing happened. He was calm, he was clear, he answered every question with confidence, and he got the job. Not because he was the smartest person in the room, but because he was the most prepared. Now, which version do you think our listeners will remember tomorrow?
The story, definitely the story. I can picture that young man in my mind. I can feel his nervousness. I can feel his relief when he got the job. The story made the lesson come alive.
And that's exactly why stories are so powerful. They create pictures in the listener's mind. They create emotions. They create connections. The top 1% of speakers use stories, metaphors, and examples constantly. A metaphor, by the way, is when you describe something by comparing it to something else. For example, if I say communication is a bridge, I'm using a metaphor. Communication is not literally a bridge, but the comparison helps you understand that communication connects people, just like a bridge connects two sides of a river.
Communication is a bridge. I really like that metaphor. It is so visual. I can see it in my mind.
And that is the power of a good metaphor. It takes an abstract idea, something you cannot touch or see, and it makes it concrete. It makes it real. So when you are explaining something, whether in English or any language, try to use a simple story or a simple comparison. It will make your message 10 times more memorable.
This is all incredible advice, Anna, but I want to address something that I know many of our listeners feel, and that is the fear of making mistakes. A lot of English learners think, I cannot speak with confidence because my grammar is not perfect. I make mistakes with verb tenses. I forget vocabulary words. My pronunciation is not like a native speaker. How do you respond to that?
I respond with something that might surprise you. Your grammar does not need to be perfect for you to be an excellent communicator. Let me say that again because it is so important. Your grammar does not need to be perfect. Confidence in communication does not come from perfect grammar. It comes from your energy. It comes from your presence. Presence means the feeling you create when you are in a room. It is the way people experience you. Some people walk into a room and everyone notices them, not because they are loud, not because they use perfect grammar, but because they have a calm, steady, confident energy. That is presence.
So presence is about how you make people feel, not about how many grammar rules you know.
Exactly. And here's something fascinating. Research shows that when someone speaks with confidence, with good eye contact, with steady intonation, with clear and simple words, listeners actually do not notice small grammar mistakes. The confidence covers the small errors. But when someone speaks with perfect grammar but sounds nervous, quiet, and unsure, listeners feel uncomfortable. They lose trust. So if you have a choice between perfect grammar and confident delivery, choose confident delivery every single time.
That is so liberating. The word liberating means it sets you free, and I think that idea really does set people free. You do not have to be perfect, you just have to be clear and confident.
And I want to add one more thing about this: vulnerability. Vulnerability means being open and honest even when it feels risky. The top 1% of communicators are not afraid to show vulnerability. They are not afraid to say, I do not know the answer, but I will find out. They are not afraid to say, I made a mistake, and here's what I learned from it. They are not afraid to say, English is not my first language, but I am going to share my ideas with you anyway. That honesty, that openness is incredibly attractive. It makes people respect you more, not less.
I think that is one of the most powerful things you have said today, Anna. Being vulnerable is not a weakness, it's a strength.
It is one of the greatest strengths a communicator can have. When you are vulnerable, you give other people permission to be vulnerable too. And that's when real, meaningful conversations happen. That's when real connections are formed.
Anna, we have covered so much today. Let me try to summarize what we have learned, and you can add anything I miss. First, we learned about the secret of simplicity. The top 1% do not use complicated words. They use simple, clear, concise language that everyone can understand.
Perfect.
Second, we learned about the power of the pause. Instead of rushing through our words or filling silence with and we should embrace the pause. Silence shows confidence, not weakness.
Absolutely.
Third, we learned about tone and intonation. How you say something is just as important, maybe even more important than what you say. The melody of your voice carries emotion and meaning.
That's right.
Fourth, we learned about active listening. The best communicators spend 80% of their time listening and only 20% speaking. When you truly listen, your responses become more thoughtful and more powerful.
Excellent summary so far.
Fifth, we talked about removing filler words. By replacing and with a simple pause, we can immediately sound more professional and more confident.
Yes.
Sixth, we learned about the storytelling method. Stories and metaphors make our messages memorable. Instead of listing facts, we should wrap our ideas in stories that people can see and feel.
Wonderful.
And seventh, we learned that confidence does not come from perfect grammar. It comes from presence, from energy, from clarity, and even from vulnerability. Being open and honest is a strength, not a weakness.
Abel, that was a perfect summary. You have just demonstrated something beautiful. You were clear, you were organized, you were concise, and you were confident. That is exactly how the top 1% communicate.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to say something directly to our listeners right now. If you are on this journey of learning English, if you are working hard every day to improve, I want you to know something. You are already doing something incredible. Learning a language is one of the most challenging things a person can do. It takes courage, it takes patience, it takes dedication. In the fact that you are here, listening to this episode, practicing your English, tells me that you have all three of those qualities.
That is beautifully said. And I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Communication is a skill. It is not a talent that some people are born with and others are not. It is a skill, just like cooking or playing the piano or riding a bicycle. And like any skill, it can be learned, it can be practiced, it can be improved. Every single day, you can become a better communicator. Every conversation is practice. Every time you listen to a podcast like this one, you are training your ear and your mind. Every time you speak, even if you make mistakes, you are building your confidence.
And remember, the top 1% did not start at the top. They started exactly where you are right now. They practiced, they made mistakes, they learned, they grew, and one day they looked back and realized how far they had come. That will be your story too.
We believe in you. We truly do. And we will be here every step of the way, walking with you on this journey.
So keep practicing, keep listening, keep speaking. Do not be afraid of mistakes. Do not be afraid of silence. And most importantly, do not be afraid to be yourself. Your voice matters, your words matter, and the world needs to hear what you have to say.
Before we finish, let us do a quick vocabulary review. Today we used some important communication words. The first word was concise. Concise means expressing something clearly using few words. Her answer was concise and easy to understand.
The next word was intonation. Intonation is the way your voice goes up and down when you speak. It's the melody of your speech. His intonation made the story sound exciting.
We also used the word empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. She showed great empathy when her friend was sad.
Then we talked about presence. Presence is the quality of being noticed and commanding attention when you enter a room or a conversation. The speaker had a strong presence on stage.
We used the word vulnerability. Vulnerability means being open and honest, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. Showing vulnerability made the audience trust him more.
We mentioned articulate. To articulate means to express your thoughts clearly and effectively. She was very articulate during the meeting.
And finally, we used the word transformative. Transformative means causing a major positive change. Learning to pause was transformative for his public speaking.
Those are wonderful words to practice this week, everyone. Try to use each one in a sentence. Write them down. Say them out loud. The more you use them, the more natural they will feel.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Mr. English Fluent Tutor. Share this episode with a friend who is also learning English. Leave us a comment and tell us which tip was your favorite today. Was it the power of the pause? Was it the storytelling method? Was it the idea that confidence matters more than perfect grammar? We want to hear from you.
And remember, you do not need to be perfect. You just need to be clear, be kind, and be brave enough to use your voice.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. It means the world to us.
We will see you in the next episode of The English Journey. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep speaking with confidence and ease.
Goodbye, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Goodbye, and remember, communication is a bridge. Build yours one word at a time.